Imagine it's December 31st, 2026. You're not scrambling. You're not apologizing. You're not promising next year will be different or I'll get it done next year. You're calm. Your money feels intentional. Your life feels like it's been designed, not defaulted to.
And the wildest part, nothing magical actually happened. You just stopped thinking like the old version of yourself.
So you're listening to Queer Money episode 623. And today we're sharing the top 5 tips for reframing your thinking for retirement success in 2026.
And before we get started, we'll revisit this question a little bit later, but go ahead and drop in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. What's the one thing you're no longer willing to tolerate with regard to your money or your life in 2026? We'd love to hear from you.
Hey there, it's David here in cold Ohio. Real quick, I want to tell you to skip the cliches when it comes to freedom. Invest in real mobility through the Optimized Portugal Golden Opportunities Fund. More about that from John in just a bit. So we're going to dive right in. The first thing we're going to talk about here is this idea of your wanted identity and how your wanted identity leads to your standards, and your standards lead to your after me wins, or when we say after me, that is the future person that you truly want to be. So really what we're talking about here is upgrading your identity. Your identity doesn't change your life, your standards do. So you can believe that you're someone who wants to value financial freedom, but if you pay out your paycheck on the day it arrives based on either in the now purchases or maybe in the now purchases from the past, like you decided to get that brand new car without really thinking it through, your standard says otherwise. Your standard says, I'm not actually truly someone who values freedom.
Yeah,
so
I think the thing is, we all talk about how so many of us have the same values, right? We value financial freedom. We value being healthy.
Spending time with our family.
Right. But exactly what are we doing? We're oftentimes not living according to our values. So
Right.
that's the difference, right? We're more living toward what we're willing to accept or tolerate, more of that, and that's our standard.
Right. I think that's what it is the difference is standards are something that we should hold ourselves accountable to. Our tolerance is the least what we're willing to do to achieve our standards or get close to our standards. So why do we overvalue things like these quick hits? Like I want the chips, or I want that Amazon purchase at midnight when I've had 3 glasses of wine, or that extra drink when we're out with everyone. We underestimate what the long-term consequences of these things are. We underestimate what the true consequence is, that more debt, the shame we feel about what we've done, or maybe just the idea that we're not achieving or being the person that we want to be.
I think the idea is that your values are often your wishes, right? And what we're looking for is something to live by, an expectation, a personal expectation of ourselves. So what is the standard that I'm willing to tolerate? We got to raise our standards.
Right. Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, is that values, the reality is that the vast majority of people are not able to 100% commit and always do what they value, right? There are things that we value, but there are times when we aren't going to be able to spend time with our family, like we said. But what is the standard? The standard should be close to that value.
Ideally,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we need to kind of create new standards for ourselves, especially when when it comes to money. I make healthy financial decisions based on how I will feel in the future, because the after me wants to be a different person.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. So many of us are living, we're kind of often told, like, live in the moment. But a lot of us are really trying to satiate pain or frustration or anxiety or take off the edge in the moment. And we never think about, well, if I take off the edge now, what are the consequences going to be tomorrow, right? For us, it's often a couple martinis that leads to 3 martinis. And then the next day it's like, well, we're not going to the gym now. And the last thing I want to do is eat an apple.
Right.
I want to have pancakes instead.
And a bag of chips. Right. So here, the idea here is that we want to use a reframing tool. And the reframing tool for this one is the before, during, and after test. Ask yourself, how will I feel before I do this, while I'm doing this, and after I do this. And it's oftentimes that after feeling, or in some cases, the during feeling, that will give you the indication that, if you roll your eyes at how you're feeling during or after, if the after you doesn't like it, then it's definitely a no.
I think a great example is, how many times have you not wanted to go to the gym, and then you go to the gym, and after you is like, I'm really glad I went.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the other things we talk about, this is the time of year everybody's like, new you, new me, new. They want to be that different person. The reality is that becoming a different person doesn't happen for most of us, it doesn't happen in one big step, right? For most of us,
we wanted to. It sounds great.
Right. It happens in small steps. So you can become a 100% completely different person if you just make a 1% change every day over the next 70 days. Our changes compound. It's like if you and I decide that we're going to drink only 1 or 2 days a week, it means that we're going to be less lethargic, which means that we're more likely to go to the gym, which means we're going to be feeling healthier, which means we're going to feel good about ourselves.
Probably sleep better.
Physically and mentally. Right. So just that one change of only drinking 1 to 2 days a week will actually have this compounding effect on the rest of our lives. And so if we look for those little 1% changes that we can make in our life, then our lives will be completely different in roughly 2.5 months.
Are you trying to deter me from having my dessert beer after this recording?
Well, okay, folks, we are going to be doing dry January because we want to and need to. There's some things that we really want to get done, and we understand that drinking a little bit less will help us do that. But I know you don't want to drink that spruce tasting beer.
No, it's
a holiday beer. Right. It has
to have it today.
Yeah, exactly. All right, John, number 2.
Number 2 is to really flip the script. We've talked about this so many times before. So many of us are beholden to this sort of living up to the expectations of the best little boy in the world. Mm-hmm. Being queer also means for a lot of people that we've been trained or conditioned to seek approval, to look successful, right? How many people have commented on our social media feeds that it's so expensive to be gay because I've got to have all this stuff, right?
Right.
And that just makes us more vulnerable to status spending. What we need to do is sort of flip that script and say, I don't use spending to earn belonging.
Right.
And so many of us, and this isn't exclusive to the LGBT community and certainly not to just gay men alone, but so many of us are seeking love and validation and acceptance and approval from all the stuff that we own. Well, all of our purchase, all of our travel, all of our Instagram feed.
It's a lot easier to feel good about how we look on the outside than how we feel on the inside, especially because many of us are coming from either sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's mental, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's financial traumas in our life. And those traumas are inside of us. And it's really hard unless we've done some really strong work therapy-wise to break free from those. So we need to flip the script.
Yeah, right? So if your purchase is secretly trying to buy confidence, you're really paying retail for self-esteem, And so we've got to break that. So here's our action step for this. Flip the script with this exercise. Write down one way being queer has actually made you braver, how it's made you more creative, how it's made you more resourceful and successful in various aspects of your life. So often we're focused on the challenges that it's presented to us, but we don't focus enough on the value it's provided us or society. And it's those same muscles that we're able to sort of disrupt a little bit. And that exercise can help you then get on the path to building wealth, exiting bad systems, creating location freedom, building the life that we actually want. So we're focusing on the positive aspects of things and not just always focusing on the detriment.
Yeah, it makes me think of the quote from Dr. Joe Dispenza that the neural networks that wire together. And eventually, at a certain point, you will have, if you think the same thing about yourself, whether it's positive or negative, that neural pathway will become really strong. And so this is the time frame how we want to disrupt this neural pathway that we have, that only looking successful is the way that I can be validated. but actually feeling successful inside is the way I validate me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more and more research coming out talking about the benefits of neuro-linguistic reprogramming. And it's for a lot of people, they consider it a woo-woo science. But more and more science is coming out to prove that it actually helps. And it's maybe not necessarily just sitting down there and reciting affirmations. There's a lot more involved with it. That's a little bit too simple of a prescription. But we do need to sort of reframe how we're thinking, because so many of us are sort of stuck in the whole idea of the best little boy in the world is that so many of us are still haven't grown out of the feelings and the trauma that we went through as those little boys, right? So we're just sort of stuck in that. So instead of I value freedom and travel, here's a reframe for you. Your new standard becomes I structure my life so that I can travel 30 days every year straight without financial panic and without coming back with a credit card hangover.
And how many of us would love to be able to do that? I mean, I think that's really the thing. And just starting to think that you can do that is going to start to get you on the path to do that.
Right, because once you start to think, I can do that, what do I need to do to make that happen? Your brain is then forced to figure out how can I connect the dots to make that goal become a reality, as opposed to so many people are just thinking to themselves, I can't do that. That's not available to me. You guys are just have too much privilege. You cannot relate.
Right.
And if you automatically assume that about yourself, then you're stuck. You're not going anywhere. I mean, right. Henry Ford said it, right? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
So if your immediate response to people who are trying to help you improve your financial life or uplift your life is that's not available to me, then it absolutely isn't.
Right. It kind of reminds me of that whole thing about breaking the 4-minute mile, or people who say, I can't run a marathon, but they start by walking around their backyard, and pretty soon they're walking around the block, and then they're running around the block, and then they're running a mile, and then they're running 5 miles, and then they're running 15 miles. And you start to become that person who you want to be by doing all of those things.
And my goal next year is to run a half marathon.
Right. So coming at number 3 here is this idea of if we lighten our load, we actually raise our tolerance threshold. Now, remember we said that tolerance is the minimum standard, or the minimum that we're willing to do. Our standard is something higher than that, and our value is at the top, right? What we value is at the top. So we want to raise that minimum tolerance threshold. Low standards drain our future faster than high interest credit card debt drains our
That girl in the gutter never gets out of the gutter.
Right. Most of us don't have a money problem. We have a tolerance problem. Like we tolerate clutter. We tolerate the fact that we have all those subscriptions that we are not really using. We tolerate that, well, I'll pay that debt off later when I'm earning more.
And later never comes.
Right. We have all these spending contradictions to what we say that we really want. So we need to reframe ourselves with this idea that abundance starts the moment we decide, I don't want to live like this anymore. And it doesn't need to be a massive change, right? It's those small changes like we talked about before. When it comes to clutter, I'm just going to make sure that every night I go to bed with the dishes in the dishwasher and the kitchen is clean.
Well, can you say that again, husband?
We do a really good job at that. We do actually do a really good job at that. But I think that if you just make that one little shift, right? Instead of hanging my clothes up on the hook in the closet, I'm actually going to throw them in the hamper, or I'm going to hang them up properly. All those kinds of things, I know. All of those kinds of things really add up to an abundance. Now, and remember, abundance doesn't just mean your money, right? Abundance is all of those things in your life.
Right. Yeah. If your life is cluttered, there's a very good chance that your finances are cluttered and your relationships are cluttered. And but that's just one example. Number 4 tip here is when to learn. We have to, as we talked about earlier, we need to sort of break those neural loops. So there's the statement that you're always winning or you're learning. The problem is that most of us don't actually look for the lesson when we're being taught it, especially when it's a bad lesson, but also when it's a good lesson.
Right. We're replacing learn here with the F word that most of us don't like to say, but sometimes think about ourselves. We think that we're a failure when it comes to various aspects of our life. We're not a failure. We're just learning. And sometimes it takes us learning that lesson over and over again.
And I'll tell you that this has been a prime a big lesson that I finally learned in 2025. When we lost Capital One as a sponsor and we were losing all, and nobody wanted to hire us and all that because of the anti-DEI movement, and we weren't sure exactly where our money was going to come from. That was like the umpteenth time we were taught the lesson to not get all wrapped up in the doom spiral, not get stuck in limited thinking and financial insecurity, and to figure out a way to leverage the assets and the resources that we have to survive. And we did that, and 2025 has been it turns out one of the best years we've ever had. And even though things are changing for us now that we can't necessarily disclose, that don't seem positive on the surface, I'm just not worried about it because it's always worked out.
Yeah.
It hasn't always worked out the way I thought, but it's always worked out. And we talked about, the goals the reason that we started our business was we wanted to spend more time together. We wanted to travel more. We wanted to have financial security in retirement. We wanted to give back more to the community. And for so often we got stuck on these other goals that weren't actually our goals. But when we look back, we've actually achieved all of our goals, which is why we're able to retire early and retire abroad, which we'll be doing in 2026. So I think that the problem, we're not dumb. You're not dumb. We're just often all stuck in loops and we can't figure out how to get out of that. And so we've got to disrupt that loop, right? The Friday reward is after a good week of work or a hard week of work is we got to spend money on the weekend and go out and party. And then there's the Monday dread and we regret everything that we did over the weekend. And we do that all over again. We've got to break that cycle. The loop doesn't break until we have the motivation to break it. And you don't have to necessarily wait until you reach rock bottom. You just have to figure out ways to disrupt those patterns of thinking. Yeah. So the reframing exercise here is the smallest action that disrupts the pattern is more powerful than the biggest plan you can start. Create a minimum daily standard, not a new goal. So I will read a book for 10 minutes every day rather than doom scrolling. I will go for a 20-minute walk every day rather than couch surfing. I'll listen to one money podcast every week as opposed to listening to noise or music that completely irrelevant or unenjoyable.
I think one of the things that I'm reminded here of that we did when we were paying off our debt was you and I still wanted to be social. We still wanted to go out and do happy hour with our friends. But one of the things that we would do is sometimes after the first or second beer, we would text the other person and say it's time to go. Or we would set an alarm on our phone so our phone would vibrate. And we knew that when our phone vibrated, that meant, okay, we were done. We needed to cash out and move on because we knew that if we had another beer, then it would probably lead to us spending money on dinner. And if we spent money on dinner, then we probably had more drinks and maybe even went out afterwards with our friends and spent more money, right? It was just that you
disrupt
that thinking.
Now it's time to check out.
It's the same thing that neural pathways that fire together, wire together, and they're really, really hard to break. And sometimes you need some sort of outside influence. And when I say outside influence, that's pre-thinking sometimes. Sometimes it is another person as texting each other. But we did those kinds of things. So look for ways to set up the kind of the pattern breakers in the habits that you have or the ways of thinking that you have that can change 2026.
Yeah, and we can't think of these as sort of life hacks or money hacks. We need to sort of think of these as votes for your future identity, the person that you want to become. And if you want to identify as the type of person who supports LGBTQ plus owned small businesses, you want to please like, subscribe, set notifications, click all the bells and whistles, do a review of this podcast so we can reach more LGBTQ plus people with our message of financial freedom. Do you love it?
All right, number 5 here is we need to stop obsessing over the gap and actually focus on the gain. Now I'm borrowing this gap thinking versus gain thinking from a new trading mentor of ours, Lewis Crompton, who we had on our Living Not So Fabulously show with Yahoo Finance. He is teaching, I'm going through a course of his, and he's mentoring me around a certain type of trading that
It's called swing trading and sling trading.
Yeah, and we might do an episode on that in the future to talk a little bit more about what that is and how I'm using it. But the idea here is that for most of us, we end up fixating on the difference, the gap of where we are today and where we want to be tomorrow, right? We focus on the fact that I need to lose 20 pounds rather than I need to just make one change, right? I need to I need to have $1 million before I can retire instead of I just need to bump up my 401k, 403b contributions by 1%. Most of us fixate on that gap, and what that does is it really holds us back because we get slowed down by thinking of this huge change rather than the small changes.
Right. So what's the one thing I can change to eventually be the person I want to become? Right.
Right.
Not. Oh my gosh, I have 20 pounds to lose, but if I go for a run today, I'll be one step closer to reaching my goal of being 151 pounds.
Right. Well, it's not necessarily focusing on that one change. It's actually just focusing on the change. Getting focused on changing is the gain, right? Celebrating that I made that one change, celebrating that I saved, that I didn't go out to lunch and instead put that money into my 401k or used it to pay off my debt. All of this it really, when we focus on the gap, our brain gets trapped in this idea of misery. It just looks, in many cases, it looks insurmountable. It looks so big.
If I have to lose 20 pounds and I can't stop fixating on the fact that I have to lose 20 pounds, I'll say, well, what's the big deal? I'm just going to go eat a bag of chips and I'll feel better. And then I'll be worse.
You might feel better, but then you're going to have to lose 21 pounds.
Right. Rude.
Right. So because we stare at this lack long enough, we start treating ourselves like the problem, that we're the one, I'm the issue, I need to be fixed. And Oprah nailed it when she said, if you focus on the lack, you'll never have enough. If you focus on what you have, you'll have even more. And I think that is the real thing, is that most of us want more of lots of different things in our life. A lot of us want more of those 5 freedoms that we have talked about so many times. The time freedom, the location freedom, the financial freedom to be able to make better choices, or that we have a better financial future. The relationship freedoms, being able to spend more time with the people we love. And then the me freedom that allows me to be the person that I truly want to be, no matter what anybody else says.
Yeah. So know your numbers, but don't worship the shortage.
Yeah. And when it comes to knowing your numbers, that's one of the reasons why we created the Happy Gay Retirement Calculator, is so that you can actually look at what does it take, where is you need to understand the gap first. But you need to then understand what is the gain. And so you're reframing yourself into thinking something different about your future. So go ahead and get that Happy Gay Retirement Calculator with a link in the description of this YouTube video or on your podcast player.
Hello from sunny Florida. Like you, your IRA deserves better than bland. With Optimize, you can roll it over into the Portugal Golden Opportunities Fund, keeping tax perks, building wealth, and unlocking Portugal's Golden Visa. Click now in the video description to discover more.
Abundance happens when your standards finally match your values. You don't need a new year, better motivation, more information. You just need one upgraded standard, enforced imperfectly. Allow yourself some grace, and starting today.
Yeah. So here's the real takeaway. Abundance doesn't come from a new year. It doesn't come from a better mood. It doesn't come from finally getting discipline. It comes from showing up in the moment with your standards attached to your values. So ask yourself tonight, not tomorrow, ask yourself tonight, what's one standard I'm going to raise? What is one standard I'm willing to raise today or tomorrow? Now, I don't mean in the future tomorrow, I mean literally tomorrow. And that's where the momentum starts. That's where the wealth compounds, and that's where the early retirement, the freedom, and the actual joy really comes from.
So again, we're going to revisit the question, what's one thing that you're no longer willing to tolerate in 2026 regarding your life or your money? Let us know in the comments. We'd definitely love to hear you.
Remember to join us next week when we are going to be looking at the country of Panama and the top cities for gay retirees in Panama. Central and South America seem to be a big appeal to our community right now. And until next time, remember to work your plan to be fabulous, not just today, but also tomorrow. And if this new year has you sad and you're wondering why that's usually the case, watch this episode on how and why you're so bad at predicting your happiness.